Curran Moore. On June 26, 2001, the day before her birthday, 52-year-old Curran Moore, a Caucasian lady from Davie, Florida, left her house at 7 p.m., never to return. On the following day, Christina, her 8-year-old daughter, would return from summer camp in honor of her mother's birthday. But her mother would not be present to see her. Where could Curran have disappeared to? Was her disappearance connected to any illegal activity? When will she come back? Up until now, Christina had spent a long 22 years searching for the answers to these issues. Greeting, Davie is a small suburban hamlet in Broward County, Florida, that combines the energy of Western-themed attractions with the coziness of a tight-knit community. The city's year-round sunshine, pleasant climate, and easy access to beaches are draws for both visitors and residents. Davie is well recognized for accommodating college students because it is the hub of multiple university campuses. Davie has a wealth of leisure activities, a top-notch school, and a welcoming community. Our case begins here in this lovely city today. Thomas Stewart Moore and Olga Charlotte Moore welcomed a daughter into the world on June 27, 1948. They christened her Curran Elizabeth Moore. Pam was the name of her sister as well. As a child, Curran enjoyed hiking, sailing, cooking, and playing the piano. Travel has always been Curran's passion, even as a small child. Before we continue, we want to remind you that only a small percentage of people who watch our videos are actually subscribed. So if you enjoy our content, consider subscribing. It's free. Now, let's move on with the video. It never occurred to anyone that she would go and never come back. She graduated in 1968 with an associate's degree in art, and in 1979 with a bachelor's degree in science with a nursing concentration. In 2001, 53-year-old Curran Elizabeth Moore and her spouse were going through a divorce. A restraining order was in place against him. Their 8-year-old daughter Christina was given full custody by Curran. Curran was employed as a nurse at the Boca Raton Retirement Community Edgeway Estates before to her abduction. She also never wavered in her resolve to providing Christina with a solid upbringing, even though she worked full-time. She sought to see that Christina enjoyed the best possible years. Christina also remembers Curran as a devoted mother. Curran made time for Christina despite her job as a nurse by taking her to the zoo and doing other things together. All she wanted was for her daughter to grow up happy and healthy. But this family's cheerful picture will soon give way to a depressing one that was full of unsolved mysteries. Curran was due to turn 53 on June 27, 2001. Christina had come home from Girl Scout camp to celebrate with her mother, but Curran wasn't there to greet her. Christina realized something wasn't right when Curran didn't come pick her up. Given that Curran worked as a nurse, it made sense that she would be distracted at work. But Curran was always there for her daughter, and if she had to go to work, she would have sent someone else to pick Christina up. It was an unusual circumstance. As the day went on, the story that followed expanded by the hour. The last time anyone saw Curran was on June 26, 2001, at 6:30 p.m., when she hired her neighbor's son to mow her grass. She drove away from the house in her white 1999 Saturn at around 7 o'clock in the evening. No one knew where she might have gone or why she had gone outside. Curran's sister Pam Kleiss phoned the police after waiting for her for hours, and she still hadn't arrived at the residence. Pam claimed that she had requested her former husband to pick up Christina from camp the day Curran disappeared, before she departed for work. Before leaving the house, she later had a brief talk with the son of her neighbor. What transpired following these episodes is unknown. She had a job to report for the next day. Curran worked at Edge Point Estates, a retirement community, for 8 years, and her executive director, Keith Cradle, noted her dependable and responsible work history. Curran would have alerted the establishment if there had ever been an urgent duty because she was such a passionate worker. Everyone knew how much Christina meant to her, even herself. It was obvious that Curran had not left on her own initiative. Was there more at play here, or was this just a terrible accident? As suspicions grew, so did the police's limited resources in their search for Curran Moore. The first thing they needed to do was track her car. Curran disappeared inexplicably while operating a white 1999 Saturn four-door with the license plate Who. There was an Indiana State University sticker on the rear of her automobile. The public had access to all of this information's details. Detective James Franquiz of the Davie Police Department received a tip that a woman had soon reported seeing the identical car in South Miami-Dade County, but the story was unsubstantiated and unsupported by any other witnesses. In a desperate attempt to advance the investigation, the police released a missing poster detailing Curran's looks. The posters featured her with brown hair, brown eyes, and glasses. Her height was given as 5 feet, 4 inches. In an attempt to locate Curran, the police were looking for leads, but they were not finding any. The initial survey of her house was enough to warn of terrible news. At home, her phone, suitcase, and whole clothing were found. Upon careful examination, there were no signs of forced entry or trespassing at her residence. Although the detective deduced that Curran had to have left the house willingly, the reason behind her departure remained a mystery. The public was notified by Detective James Francois that the police were looking into Curran Moo's phone and banking records. When there was no activity on her credit card or bank account, he instantly ruled out theft or robbery. This suggested that Curran was in a very bad place. She would have required money to sustain herself, as she still had all of her needs at home. Curran's family wanted the police to search for her using a helicopter, but they were unable to do so because they did not know the route Curran may take. Curran Moore had vanished from sight entirely. Days progressed into weeks, weeks into months, and months into years passed while Curran's family waited for her return. Despite the Moore family and the entire police department displaying missing person posters with incentives. Years and years went by, and Curran never returned. Her daughter, Christina, married and had children of her own, but Curran's whereabouts from that day remained a mystery. On January 6, 2023, Britton Lockhart, a scuba diver and the owner of the YouTube channel Depths of History, joined Mike Sullivan and Michael Rodriguez, who were leading the Sunshine State Sonar team in their investigation of the surrounding water bodies in Broward County. They used state-of-the-art sonar equipment to find an automobile in a Davie retention pond. When Michael's underwater sonar devices began to light up, the entire team understood they had hit automobile wheels in the water. Before discovering the automobile, they spent roughly 15 minutes looking for it. When Britton swam down to investigate, she found a license plate buried 3 feet below the surface of the muck in an exposed trunk. They were convinced they had found something important, but they didn't know exactly what it was or if it had anything to do with any previous incidents. Britton Lockhart immediately called the Davie Police Department. Even though Curran vanished inexplicably 22 years ago, the Davie police were still aware of her whereabouts. When they arrived at the location the next day, they had to send the divers back into the sea. After being pulled out of the water, the automobile was taken for further examination. The car that Curran was driving at the time of her disappearance fit the description. The license plate on Curran's car was found to be dusty. It was a noteworthy discovery in this 22-year-old instance. Pieces of the puzzle were starting to fit together. Later on, it was established that Curran Moore had been inside the car when it crashed into the lake after 2 bones were found inside. It was finally revealed to them what had become to Curran Moore. Despite the fact that the entire search operation was broadcast live on YouTube, Lockhart and Rodriguez were not allowed to talk about the case's particulars. Due to suspicions of foul play, the search teams and the Moore family were not allowed to speak with the police about the case. Christina has finally found closure on the whats, hows, and whys of her mother's disappearance. Questions that have persisted for 22 years. Curran disappeared without explanation, leaving Christina in her family's care. She would never be able to duplicate the love and intimacy she felt with her mother. She had a lot of ups and downs in her early years. She even went into foster care for a while. During these moments, she would miss her mother and hope that she would be discovered or returned to her. Every young girl desires and hopes to have their mother by her side at every stage of life. My personal birthdays, the dates I got engaged, married, and had my 2 children, Christina stated in a sorrowful interview that they never got to know their grandmother. Christina had definitely had a close relationship with her mother. Even after all these years, in 2021, she made a post on TikTok complaining about how she wished she had spent a little more time with her mother. After 22 long years, Christina finally found out what had happened to her mother. Christina was thankful to the police and search teams for enabling her to bring Curran back home and give her a peaceful burial, even though she was unable to find all the answers to the issues that had plagued her for years. The case of Curran Moss's disappearance is still being investigated. Police in Davie emailed Fox News Digital to let them know that they had spoken with the detectives, but couldn't say further because they were worried it would jeopardize the investigation's prospects of being successful. Then came the next set of urgent questions when Curran's body was found in the pond. How did Curran end up falling into the pond? What was this crime's intended outcome? If the police's suspicions are true, then who was responsible for the 22 years of pain that Christina and the Moore family endured? Now that Curran has returned home after 22 years away, there is yet hope for her. There was some degree of success, thanks to Sonos Systems technology developments and the dedication of the police department. Though at this point the answers are unclear, Curran's justice may be just around the corner. Never be reluctant to share your knowledge. Your expertise might be essential to unlocking a long-standing enigma. Was it an accident that killed Curran? Or was there a darker motive? Do you believe there is still hope for this case? Share your thoughts with us by posting them in the comments box. Moving on to the next case. Magalie Part. On January 17th, 1982, Eric Bertrand, a truck driver, and Evelyn, a housewife and stay-at-home mother, welcomed Magalie into the world. Was raised in the town of Langhans and was the oldest of 5 children. When she was 12 years old, her parents got divorced in 1994, and her father then moved to Switzerland to start a new life and get married again. Nevertheless, she stayed in touch with him, and they had a close relationship. Feeling hurt by the separation, Magalie decided to stay in France and live with her mother. She met Jeffrey Part, a 23-year-old, on July 12, 1998, at the age of 16. Jeffrey was raised in a violent home. Jeffrey was placed in foster care for a portion of his childhood, while his father, Patrick, struggled with alcoholism. But as an adult, he had made amends and put his connection with his father back together. He had just spent a few days in jail after his ex-girlfriend accused him of domestic abuse when he first met Magalie. After finding out about Jeffrey's past, Magalie's mother voiced distaste for the young guy. After a falling out between mother and daughter, Magalie moved in with her father and started working as a caregiver at a retirement community. The 18-year-old Magalie wed Jeffrey in 2000. After relocating to the town of Ornex, Magalie started working at a do-it-yourself store, and her husband found work as a painter and decorator. Magalie fed Jeffrey breakfast on March 26, 2001, before he departed for work. That day, he wasn't scheduled to be at work, but for unknown reasons, he either chose to go in or was requested to. While they were eating, Magalie informed him that she intended to walk their Rottweiler puppy to a convenience store to get cigarettes. It was just a 2.5-mile journey there and back. However, when Jeffrey got home at 4:30 from work, he found that neither his wife nor his new puppy were there. Since Magalie had prepared breakfast, the kitchen had not been cleaned up. The 19-year-old was usually a tidy person who cleaned up after herself, so this was really strange. Jeffrey called Magalie's parents, who had not seen her, out of concern. When he arrived at her job at around 5 o'clock in the evening, he discovered that she had not reported sick and had not shown up for her afternoon shift. After that, Jeffrey reported his wife missing at the police station. After that, he went back to his house and enlisted the aid of a friend with an ATV to assist him in his search for Magalie. In order to get some rest, they decided to end the quest at around 5 in the morning. Around 11 in the morning, a young man who was picking mushrooms next to his uncle's farm found the body of a woman. She had been burned and was just half clothed. The man believed at first that someone had dropped a mannequin, but upon closer inspection, he saw that his assumption was incorrect. After he ran to his uncle's farm, they made a police call. Investigators recognized the deceased as 19-year-old Mag parties using the report that Jeffrey submitted and personalized jewelry engraved with the couple's names and wedding dates. They found a chocolate bar wrapper, a knife with its blade wedged into a tree, and a cigarette but next to the body. They found a gasoline-filled jerry can 300 meters away. After analysis, it was discovered that the cigarette but belonged to a Moroccan brand that was only available in Switzerland. Interestingly, investigators discovered no evidence of a fire at the site where Magalie's body was discovered, indicating to them that she was killed elsewhere and her remains were subsequently disposed of in the woodlands. 2 days after Magalie disappeared, on March 28th, an autopsy was performed. She had been assaulted, sustaining 12 fractures across her body. The medical examiner was unable to ascertain the precise moment of her death because she had been burned later. In addition, Magalie's cause of death has never been made public. Additionally, the ME found sperm within the 19-year-old's body, indicating that she had engaged in sexual activity 48 hours before her passing. But there was nothing to suggest that she had experienced sexual assault. The ME discovered a prescription drug for anxiety inside her veins. Investigators were never able to locate a prescription for the medicine in Magalie's name, and neither Jeffrey nor her family was aware that she was using it. Even though Magalie didn't smoke this brand, further examination of the cigarette, but that was found at the site revealed that her DNA was present. Even stranger, investigators discovered that the cigarette had been thrown away following the 19-year-old's passing. It also prompted law officials to speculate about the likelihood of manufactured scenes. Magalie's possessions were not found with her death and have not been found again in the years that have passed. However, the Rottweiler puppy showed up 5.5 miles from Ornix in the town of Kosovo, unhurt and hungry. The puppy was clean and dry even though it had been raining between the 26th and the 28th. She had the scent of Magalie's fragrances too. She lost her leash, which has never been found. Even though the dog might have interacted with the offender, Jeffrey received her back from the police instead of having her examined for forensic evidence. Following Magalie's last known actions, the investigators discovered that the 19-year-old had gone out with 2 pals the day before she passed away. Investigators learned from one of the acquaintances that Magalie had said her that year's birthday present of underwear was from Jeffrey's father, Patrick. Magalie checked her voicemail and shut off her phone at 10 o'clock that same day. The man's uncle, who discovered her death that morning, said that his dogs had been barking nonstop for some time, maybe sensing someone in the woods. This happened at 2 and 5 in the morning. Regarding his role, Patrick doesn't seem to have ever addressed the fact that he gave lingerie to his daughter-in-law. Jeffrey dismissed the accusation as untrue. On the 26th, the day of Magalie's disappearance, Patrick says he went to the couple's home at 10 in the morning to get the mail, but she wasn't there. The reason Patrick's mail was at the couple's house is unknown. Someone tried to withdraw about a $400 from an ATM on the 26th in the town of Saint-Jean-Pied at 1 p.m., but they were unable because they had entered the incorrect PIN. But this person also had Jeffrey's credit card, so they took a $35 out of his accounts. It seems that the unidentified person knew his PIN. The specifics of what happened are unknown, since we were unable to locate any information that would have explained how the murderer had gotten Jeffrey's credit card, or whether or not he had reported it missing. Magalie was in this same town on the day of her death, between 9:30 and 11 a.m., according to 3 other eyewitnesses. Her family doesn't know how or why she came to be here. The 19-year-old didn't have a car, therefore it was a very lengthy walk for them to get Smokes on foot. Nonetheless, every eyewitness has acknowledged that they could not be positive that the young woman they saw was Magalie. Magalie's case has not received much media coverage throughout the years. Her family has been dissatisfied with the investigation's lack of progress and has regularly expressed their suffering to the media because the murder happened close to them. Given that the murder happened near the Swiss border, journalists there started to show an interest in the case and start discussing it. eventually exposing multiple shortcomings on the part of the police. They said that photos of tire tracks discovered at the scene had been lost, DNA samples had been lost, and then found again during the investigation. And the police had been so convinced that Magalie was the victim of a random attack that they had not looked into other options in detail. The intensity of the attack suggested that the 19-year-old was the target of great anger. However, their automobiles were not inspected, and friends, relatives, and co-workers were not appropriately questioned. Law police also thought that Magalie had been seen that day in a different place by the eyewitnesses. They therefore did not look into alternative hypotheses and firmly felt that she had vanished at the time of her last sighting. Jeffrey, Magalie's spouse, was excluded from consideration as a suspect due to his unwavering alibi and non-existence of a vehicle. 3 years after her passing, in 2004, it was found that the 19-year-old had missed multiple days of work in the months before the crime. Nevertheless, this information was unknown to Jeffrey and the other family members. 2 years later, Patrick and Jeffrey were detained by the police and interrogated. In the end, they were freed because there was insufficient evidence to connect either man to the crime. Although Jeffrey has never disclosed the identity of the attacker to the public, it is said that he knows who they are. When Magalie vanished, according to his father, who was questioned over the lingerie episodes, he was at home. His alibi's degree of tightness is unknown. Since then, there have been very little updates on Magalie's situation. Eric, her father, organized fundraisers in 2015 to enable the family to employ a private detective. The private investigation company confirmed to media what they already knew. The police made numerous mistakes during the initial investigation and might have overlooked important details as a result. Magalie's body was excavated in 2016 to conduct more analysis, but no meaningful results were obtained. Jeffrey, Magalie's husband, remarried and had 4 children with his new spouse after she passed away. He committed suicide on September 15, 2018. Magalie's parents are unsure on how to handle his suicide as well, whether it sprung from sorrow over losing Magalie or from guilt. His new wife claims the murder haunted the couple for the whole of their marriage, despite the fact that he made no reference of his murdered wife in his suicide notes. Fingerprints were found on the cigarette, but that was recovered from the crime scene after a re-examination in 2020. But they belonged to an unidentified person. The prints was too strong for Jeffrey or his father Patrick. The case is still unresolved. Moving on to the next case. Patricia Chupko Bender. Susan Robin Bender, Patricia Chupko Bender's only child, was born on November 27, 1970, in Modesto, California. On April 25, 1986, 15-year-old Susan left her family's home to spend the weekend at her friend's beachside home in Carmel. She strolled by herself to the Greyhound bus station at 10th and G Street. While Susan was waiting for the bus, she ran into several friends. She told them about her trip to the shore and that she would be back in a few days. After their conversation, Susan called someone on the pay phone at the depot. A full-size 1977 Ford van with an olive green appearance pulled up 10 minutes later. Susan got into the vehicle. This is where Susan was last seen. It was common for a 15-year-old to enjoy this much independence in the 1980s. Patricia Bender, Susan's mother, assumed her daughter had made it to Carmel safely and was having fun with her friends. When Susan failed to make the customary phone call home, her mother became concerned. She reported her daughter missing on May 1st, 1986. The police came to the conclusion that Susan had met a horrific end quite fast. A detective informed the local newspaper, "We have specific evidence that suggests foul play was involved in Susan Bender's disappearance." Susan's mother told the same newspaper that even though Susan had run away from home twice before, she had always come back pretty fast. Patricia mentioned that our relationship had been going well for a few months before she disappeared. She showed no indication that she intended to flee. She said that Susan's clothes, diaries, and phone book had been found in the possession of an unidentified male subject of interest. Patricia said, "I fear that a man who was questioned by the police but was never taken into custody attacked her. They had a ton of circumstantial evidence against him, but they decided not to take him into custody." Susan's disappearance was never considered voluntary by the authorities. Detective Richard Rodinier informed a journalist in 1987 that he thought Susan was definitely dead. Rodinier worked on the investigation until he retired in 2000. In a 1999 interview with Susan's mother, the police claimed that in the absence of a body, there is not much they can do. Detective Reeson stated that Susan Bender simply vanished off the face of the planet in that same year. The most bizarre aspect of this case is that no one has ever come forward to reveal what happened to her, and no information about her has arisen over the years. In 1999, young ladies in the surrounding Stockton region were also the target of two childhood friends from Linden, California, Lauren Herzog and Wesley Skirmentine. One could speculate that Susan was one of their victims. Many of their victims are still unknown. Even though the authorities were unaware of it, it's probable that the men were involved in Susan's kidnapping, even though she vanished while they were busy carrying out their nefarious plans. Their victim-focused approach was congruent with Susan's disappearance. But after years of research, Susan's case had never been linked to the crimes of Skirmentine or Herzog. The two bad companions went on a rampage between 1980 to 1990. Several ladies may have been among the 15 or more individuals they slaughtered. Susan's case, meanwhile, remained unresolved for nearly 40 years. Investigators spoke with friends and relatives who had fought to keep Susan's tale intact. Sandy Silveria, a friend of Susan's, remarked in 2021, "Where is she? What happened to her? Whoever did this needs to be held responsible." In an attempt to locate the long-lost teenager, the Modesto Police Department announced in October 2021 that they had revived the investigation. "We found possible areas of opportunity in this case review that could help advance this case. This includes using technical breakthroughs," the agency said in a statement. "We also believe that considering the circumstances surrounding the crime, there may be unidentified individuals who have knowledge of crucial information regarding Susan's disappearance." In the years since Susan disappeared, investigators investigating into cold cases in Modesto had anticipated that additional witnesses might feel compelled to come forward. The police agency said in a statement from 2022 that it was important to remember Susan was a small child living with a family. Unfortunately, it has taken the family 36 years to get justice or closure. It is our duty as a group to assist in bringing some sort of resolution to the situation while still working for justice. At last, the Modesto Police Department announced Raymond Lewis Stafford's arrest on Thursday, August 17, 2023. On August 15, 2023, Lewis, who is currently 76 years old, was taken into custody in Wills Point, 50 miles east of Dallas, where he had been living for almost 5 years. Stafford appeared to be living in plain sight for many years. Detectives were able to acquire an arrest warrant on August 10th. But the Texas Van Zandt County Sheriff's Department didn't show up at his house and take him into custody until Tuesday. After being captured without incident and being put into the Van Zandt County Jail, he was charged with Susan's murder. More details about what the Modesto police think occurred to Susan were not disclosed. While he awaits extradition to California, Raymond Lewis is now being held in custody in Texas. How precisely the detective focused on him as a possible suspect is unknown. Modesto police have been posing several unanswered questions to the Stanislaus County District Attorney's Office, but they say they don't have any further information to provide. Newspapers and local radio stations got in touch with the Stanislaus County District Attorney and the Modesto Police Department to inquire about what transpired prior to the suspect being taken into custody. However, they did not hear back. Regarding Susan's cause of death, whether her body could be located, or the new evidence that led to Raymond Lewis's indictment, none of this information was made public. In a press release, Modesto police praised the California Department of Justice, the Stanislaus County District Attorney's Office, and multiple Texas authorities for their support during the difficult and lengthy investigation. It said that the resolution of Susan Robin Bender's case was made possible by these agencies working together. Almost immediately after they began to suspect foul play, detectives had a suspect. Lewis was arrested 1 month after Susan vanished on suspicion of committing a different burglary, according to court records filed in Stanislaus County. At the time, authorities used the green van to find Lewis. His name had not been released to the public at that point. They found out throughout their inquiry that Susan's mother, Patricia Bender, had had a brief collaboration with Raymond Stafford Lewis. At the time, Patricia claimed she suspected that after contacting their home phone, Lewis might have grown close to her daughter. Patricia briefly worked for Stafford Lewis at his security company in 1985, according to court documents. They also mentioned that she had dated Lewis a few times. Susan was familiar with Lewis. At the bus stop, Susan had been seen getting into his rented van. She allegedly stepped into his van without hesitation, according to her acquaintance who was at the bus stop the day she disappeared. In the 1980s, Raymond Stafford allegedly confessed to killing a woman by strangling her with a wire or cable and burying her close to the Big Oak Flat Yosemite entrance, according to a former resident of Stafford's home. He said that he drove to a campground near the Big Oak Flat entrance to Yosemite National Park and excavated the grave, according to court records that were retrieved. The 38-year-old Raymond Stafford filed to run for Modesto City Council in the months after Susan vanished. In July 1985, he told the local newspaper that his criminal past was just the result of being in the wrong place at the wrong time when they asked about it. According to his arrest documents, he was operating an unregistered private investigation business while donning a badge designating him as a private investigator. Stafford stated that the primary goal of his campaign was to pass legislation protecting children from predators. "We don't waste any time pursuing those who are bothering our kids," he said. Unsurprisingly, he failed to win an election. 5 months later, in December 1986, Stafford was found guilty of setting a company on fire after he acknowledged making a fraudulent police complaint. He allegedly staged a kidnapping in order to avoid appearing in court. In 1994, he came back on a law enforcement's radar. He was registered as an offender on the offender registry under the identity Greg Tunningly for the abuse of a 13-year-old girl in California. New court filings identified the individual as Stafford. Patricia Bender revealed that, after learning that the two had a covert relationship, she had always assumed Stafford was the cause of her daughter's disappearance. Patricia said, "I've known since the beginning when my daughter went missing. I've known all along that he was the one responsible. The investigators disregarded my statement to them." Patricia went on to claim that the idea had been a part of her for the preceding 37 years. She continued, "To be honest, I felt like I was lost. It was as if I were a wandering dead woman. It stings to hear other people talk about their kids and grandchildren." Patricia stated that the recollections of her 15-year-old daughter served as her source of inspiration. She thought about Susan's gregarious personality. She was a hilarious person. Patricia explained that she was simply a normal teenager trying to figure out who she was. Patricia Bender was tenacious, but her hunt for her daughter had been agonizing up until now. She spoke about needing to rely on her religion. She said, "I'm grateful. I'm relieved that the system has finally decided to do something and stop keeping me in the dark." Those closest to Susan hope to locate her in order to give her the send-off they have always felt she deserves. In the last act, her mother finally admits that she has never had trouble forgiving Stafford. "It may sound strange to say, but I have moved past his cruelty toward my kid. Since I don't want to bear that weight for the rest of my life, I really have." Patricia said this arrest has cleared a big cloud off her shoulders. "I'm not really excited about how the trial will go at this stage. All I want to do is find Susan's body." In her final statement, she stated, "My message is a simple one. Now pay attention to your kids." Moving on to the next case. Raina Reeson. A date with Matt Elser after work was something Raina Reeson was looking forward to, considering she had recently broken up with him. Their goal was to reconcile and try to get back together as a couple. Sadly, The date never came to pass because Raina Reeson was last seen alive at approximately 6 p.m. on March 26, 1993, when her automobile arrived. Before answers were finally given 21 years later, Raina Reeson's family and the police were plagued by the question of what happened to her for decades. The murder case of today takes us to LaPorte, Indiana, the county seat of LaPorte County, and a little town located roughly 70 miles southeast of Chicago. LaPorte, which translates to the door in French, is a typical tiny Midwestern town with lots of pubs and cafes, trees, and independent stores. Although it isn't thought of as a location where terrible crimes are likely to happen, in 1993, there was a crime that rocked the entire neighborhood. Ben and Curran Reeson welcomed Raina into the world on May 6, 1976, in LaPorte County, Indiana. Raina Reeson, a sophomore at LaPorte High School, was a typical student in the spring of 1993. She had participated in the school band and played various instruments. Her academic records show that she consistently received good grades. She worked 3 jobs and was an honor student. Raina Reeson was really determined to be a veterinarian. She even took a job at an animal hospital since she loves animals. The 16-year-old appeared to have everything under control. Raina Reeson left her home at roughly 4 o'clock on Friday, March 26, 1993, looking like she was going about her usual workday at Pine Lake Animal Hospital. She'd recently broken up with her long-term boyfriend, Matt Elser, and had planned a date with him after work. They believed that the date would help them in their plans to reconcile. When Matt Elser, a sophomore at LaPorte High School, went to Raina Reeson's place of employment to pick her up at the end of the day, he was shocked to discover that she was nowhere to be found. Instead, with the doors closed and the lights off, the animal hospital appeared abandoned. He made a few passes past the hospital, but he was still unable to locate her or her vehicle. Matt Elser drove to her house, supposing she had come by to pick up a few things. When Ben, Raina's father, arrived to her residence, he was informed that Raina had not come home from work either. They made the decision to wait for her return, but when she still hadn't returned home at 10:30 at night, they felt something wasn't right and began to fear the worst. Wendy, Raina's younger sister, and her parents made the decision to go to the station and report her missing. They were instructed to hold off on filing a missing person report for 24 hours after they arrived. Ben made an effort to reason with the police, pointing out that although Raina's prolonged absence from home was unusual, there was nothing the police could do until the 24-hour period had passed. The next day, an investigation was started to find her. Raina Reeson's family called her acquaintances, including her older sister Lori, to see if anyone had seen her, but no one seemed to know where Raina Reeson had disappeared to. The Reeson family distributed leaflets across the neighborhood, and the police issued a general call for information leading to Raina's location. Witnesses who claimed to have seen Raina Reeson outside the veterinary hospital conversing with 2 men in a vehicle provided a lead. They claimed she seemed like she was fighting and squabbling with one of them. It appeared to the witnesses to be a couple's quarrel. With their recent breakup, the police surmised that Matt Elser was probably one of those men. After questioning him, they learned that he had no involvement in Raina Reeson's disappearance. Furthermore, Raina's parents thought Matt Elsa had nothing to do with her abduction, even though they had approved of their daughter's connection with him. Raina Reeson's car was discovered with the hood up on County Road 200 East the following evening, after a relentless search that had taken place barely 9 miles from the animal hospital where she worked. The car appeared to have broken down on the side of the road at first, but it was subsequently found that the keys were in the ignition and the vehicle started without any issues. Investigators thought the vehicle had been set up to appear to be in a breakdown. They found a man's ring and Raina Reeson's pocketbook when they searched the vehicle. The investigators wanted to know who owned the ring because they believed it could hold answers. Then someone asked Matt Elser about the ring. He claimed that although it wasn't his, it belonged to Raina Reeson's ex-boyfriend, Jason Tibbs. While in the 7th grade, Jason Tibbs and Raina Reeson dated for 6 months. Raina began dating Matt Elser shortly after their breakup. When Jason Tibbs was questioned by the police, he acknowledged that the ring was his. He claimed to have been working on Raina's car when he took off the ring, put it inside, and then forgotten about it when questioned how it got inside. They went on to question him about his activities on the night that Reeson vanished. He said that he was going fox hunting with a few of his mates. A car-based version of hide-and-seek is called fox hunting. The seeker had to locate the people who were hiding by using the CB radio to get hints about their whereabouts. When police questioned with his pals, they acknowledged that they were participating in the game, but none of them really acknowledged seeing Jason Tibbs during it. Even though it wasn't solid enough, Jason Tibbs' alibi at the time was sufficient to exonerate him. Reeson was still being sought after. Weeks grew into months as days continued to pass. Ultimately, on April 26, 1993, a month after her abduction, a father was fishing in a rural pond with his teenage daughter, north of US 20 in LaPorte County, immediately off Range Road. They found a dead person that was completely clothed and had 2 logs across its back. When the police arrived, they saw that the deceased person was dressed in clothing that matched Raina's when she vanished, which is why the man had phoned the police right away. Later on, it was established that the body belonged to Reeson. The medical examiner concluded that Reeson died from asphyxiation, which is the result of being choked and oxygen deprived, while the coroner declared Reeson's death to be a homicide. The police had suspected a few people before her remains were found who might have been involved in her disappearance. Among the handful of suspects was Ray McCarty. He had been a suspect in the early stages of the investigation and was married to Raina's elder sister, Lori, but he had maintained he had never seen her. The authorities had released him since there wasn't enough evidence. But soon after she was located, the investigator received a tip stating that Ray McCarty needed to be thoroughly questioned since he had previously been found guilty of child molestation for repeatedly raping Reeson when she was 11 years old and getting her pregnant when she was 14 years old. In 1991, Ray McCarty was given a 3-year suspended sentence, and Reeson underwent an abortion. His probation expired on January 5, 1993, a mere 2 months prior to Raina's abduction and subsequent death. Given that he was likely upset with Raina for coming clean about what he had done to her, the police reasoned that he might have actually been involved in her death. Another witness had come forward, claiming to have seen Ray McCarty at Reeson's workplace, the animal hospital. Ray McCarty was brought in by the police for more questioning after this, and on this occasion, he acknowledged having seen Raina the night before she vanished. He told the police that he was searching for a house on Warren Street, which is right next to the animal hospital, to buy at approximately 5:40 p.m. on March 26, 1993. Ray McCarty reported that from his house, he could see Raina's automobile parked in the lot in the animal hospital. He then proceeded to the veterinary facility, where he discovered someone mopping or sweeping the foyer. She said that she didn't know where Lori was when he asked, and he walked away. He said to the police that he had picked up a female hitchhiker that evening and didn't want Lori to find out when they questioned him about why he had first lied about seeing Raina. He claimed that despite his sexual abuse of Lori's sister, she was still untrustworthy of him. Although Ray McCarty was thought to be a person of interest in the case, there was no proof that he was involved in the crime, and the investigation stalled for some time in the absence of any more leads. 1.5 years later, Larry Hall's van was stopped by Indiana police. His attempted kidnapping led to his arrest. In his van, the cops found media cuttings featuring Raina and a prescription bottle bearing the name Reeson. Larry Hall said he had slain Reeson and abducted her after being apprehended. But after looking over his allegation, the police found the prescription bottle was phony and that he was in Kentucky when Reeson vanished. Larry Hall was subsequently given a life sentence for a different murder, even though he was cleared out as a suspect in this case. The detectives tasked with solving the Reeson's case made the decision to re-examine the males in Raina's life in 1998. The authorities thought Matt Elser did not murder Raina since his story remained unchanged. Investigators examined Jason Tibbs' fox hunting alibi. They came to the conclusion that it was insufficiently solid because the players were in their own cars and did not acknowledge seeing Tibbs. In the process, they obtained a search warrant to examine Ray McCarty's property and looked at his profile. Subsequently, investigators discovered 2 handguns, a stun gun, and blood in his car. In May 1998, Ray McCarty was immediately taken into custody and charged with murder. However, during Ray's incarceration, Port County elected Robert Beckman as their new prosecutor, who determined that there was insufficient evidence to pursue Ray McCarty's case to trial. It never occurred to investigators to find out where the blood in his automobile came from. Given that Ray McCarty was rumored to be a hunter, it's plausible that the blood in his car belonged to an animal. In August 1999, Ray McCarty's allegations were withdrawn, and the matter once more became cold. 9 years later, in March 2008, the case was revived after 14-year-old Ricky Hammonds contacted the police claiming to have information related to Raina Reeson's disappearance and death. Police were informed by Ricky Hammonds, a murderer serving a jail sentence, that he had seen Jason Tibbs and another man by the name of Eric Freeman drag his sister's car into the family pole barn. It was rumored that Eric Freeman had moved in with them to be with Ricky Hammond's sister, with whom he was at the time dating. Ricky had discovered a body inside the trunk, its face uncovered and covered with a blanket, when Jason Tibbs and Eric Freeman had opened it. He said at the time that he was unaware Raina was the cause until he saw the news reports about her death and disappearance. Ricky Hammonds informed the police that he had been smoking marijuana in the barn at the time and did not want to get into trouble, which is why he had never come forward before. Then, after calling Eric Freeman at his South Carolina home, detectives questioned him regarding the killing of Raina Reeson. Eric Freeman evaded all questions because he wanted to avoid being implicated as an accomplice. But in 2013, the police gave him another call. This time, he testified because the police promised to protect him from prosecution if he was honest and cooperative in the investigation into Raina Reeson's murder. Then, as Raina was leaving work, he told the police he and Jason Tibbs had driven to the animal hospital at around 6 o'clock. Jason Tibbs and Raina Reeson then got into a car that was being driven by Eric Freeman. Raina was persuaded not to reconcile with Matt Elserby Tibbs, who was aware of the problems in their relationship. The prospect of dating Jason Tibbs once more did not sit well with Raina. Raina and Jason Tibbs stepped out of the car when it pulled over on the side of the road, and they got into a fight that ended with Jason hitting Raina and sending her to the ground. He then fatally choked her. Then, Jason Tibbs and Eric Freeman placed her body inside the car's trunk. Later, they pulled the car into the Hammonds family's pole barn without realizing that Ricky Hammonds was hiding there and had witnessed all of the events. When angry and terrified Eric Freeman confronted Jason Tibbs at the pole barn, asking him why he had killed Raina, Tibbs replied, "If I can't have her, nobody can." Then, at the pond on Range Road where Raina was discovered, Eric Freeman assisted Jason Tibbs in disposing of her body. Jason Tibbs was taken into custody by the authorities in August 2013 and accused of killing Raina Reeson. On August 23, 2013, a Friday, he was entered into custody. Since his ring was discovered in Raina Reeson's car early in the inquiry, Jason Tibbs has been a person of interest, according to court filings. Additionally, notes from Jason to Raina that were taken from her bedroom stated that he would do practically everything to win her back as a boyfriend. 2 love letters sent by Jason Tibbs to Raina Reeson in the 7th grade were also read aloud by the professional sector. In both letters, he declared his love for her and conveyed his sadness that they were apart. A letter said, "It kinda bothers me that you're only with one person. I feel envious of Matt." The trial of Jason Tibbs lasted from October 2014 to November of the same year. Throughout the trial, the defense attempted to undermine the testimony of Eric Freeman and Ricky Hammonds. Because Ray McCarty had previously vowed to kill Raina Reeson if she revealed their sexual relationship, they concentrated their attention on Ray McCarty as Raina Reeson's killer. The jurors, however, did not buy into the defense's theory. After being found guilty of murder, Jason Tibbs, was given a 40-year jail sentence in December 2014. His lawyer, Scott King, attempted to overturn the murder conviction a year later, but the Indiana Supreme Court rejected his case. Ben Reeson, Raina's father, stated in an interview after his arrest that murdering someone does not mean that you are murdering that person. You kill off an entire family. Even though Raina's murderer has been apprehended, her family does not yet appear to have found closure in her passing. Ben Reeson put it this way: you take it day by day and you learn to live with it. As you can't move past it, you have to learn to live with it. He also stated that he hoped to find some sort of tranquility. Moving on to the next case. Rita Curran. A distress call was placed to the Burlington, Vermont Police Department early on July 20th, 1971. The sad murder of Rita Curran, her roommate, was reported by a worried woman. She found her dead body in a pool of her own blood on their shared bed when she got home from work. The horrific scene showed that Rita had been the victim of a vicious attack involving physical assault, sexual assault, and strangulation by an intruder who had broken into their apartment. Rita had clearly engaged in ferocious combat with her attacker. Despite a thorough investigation and a number of leads, Rita's killer's identity remained a perplexing enigma for many years for both her family and the Burlington Police Department. That being said, the offender was eventually discovered after 52 long years. Born in Brooklyn, Kings County, New York, on June 21, 1947, Rita Curran was the cherished daughter of Thomas and Mary Curran. Rita was regarded as a kind, giving, and attractive person who was also known for her sensitive demeanor and dislike of hurting other people. She decided to move out of her parents' house for the first time at the age of 24 in the summer of 1971. She would share an apartment on Brooks Avenue in Burlington, Vermont with 3 other roommates, none of whom she had gotten along well with yet. In addition to teaching second grade at Milton Elementary School, Rita was a graduate student at the University of Vermont. She was hired as a maid at a nearby motel for the summer. Tragically, Rita was viciously murdered inside her Burlington apartment 2 weeks after leaving her family's home. She was found with curlers in her hair, indicating, according to the police report, that she was getting ready for bed when she was attacked. The normally friendly and tranquil city of Burlington was rocked by the horrifying murder of Rita Curran. At the time, a lot of people lived with their front doors open, and this horrible crime destroyed the community's sense of security. Given that the police investigation found no evidence of force being used to the entrance door, it is plausible that Rita Curran's apartment door was unlocked at the time of her death. As part of their investigation, the police gathered evidence from the crime scene, including a solitary cigarette that appeared to have been left for burnout by the murderer next to Rita Curran's arm. Along with interviewing Rita Curran's neighbors, the police also investigated hundreds of tips. Williams and Michelle DeRouse, a recently married couple who lived 2 floors above Rita Curran at the time of her murder, were among the neighbors who were questioned. They told the detectives that despite spending the entire night together, they had not heard or seen anything unusual. Ted Bundy was one of the 13 suspects on the police's list. It was found that Ted Bundy's birthplace, the Elizabeth Lund Home for Unmarried Mothers, was not far from the neighborhood motel where Rita Curran worked. Rita Curran's murder and the crime scene were so close to Ted Bundy's methods that retired FBI agent John Bassett suggested that Curran be the culprit. Rita Curran's sister Mary Campbell Curran submitted a letter to Ted Bundy's prisoner on Floral's death row, hoping to get some answers and establish if Bundy was actually the one who killed her. In response, the FBI told her that there was no hard proof that Ted Bundy was in Burlington on the day of the murder and that he had refused to admit or deny his role in Curran's killing. But when Ted Bundy was examined by investigator Robert B. Capel, he eventually confessed to him that he had killed a young woman in Burlington in 1971 while he was there obtaining information regarding his birth. Nonetheless, Ted Bundy denied having anything to do with Rita Curran's case to FBI Special Agent William Hackmere on January 22, 1989, the eve of his execution. After pursuing every possible lead and not being able to identify a suspect through sophisticated DNA testing, the case went unresolved for more than 40 years. Acting Burlington Police Chief John Murad says the department has always worked to bring Rita Curran's family's case to justice. All of the murder scene's evidence, including the cigarette, was transferred by the Burlington Police Department to a forensic lab in New York City in 2014 so that DNA could be collected. Despite the fact that the test produced a DNA profile from the cigarette, it did not match any DNA in the national databases kept by law enforcement. This implied that the person whose DNA was found on the cigarette had probably never had it added to the database, maybe as a result of not having been convicted of any felonies. Moreover, none of the 13 primary suspects that the police had identified had any DNA that the DNA testing had found a match. But in 2019, Detective Lieutenant James Trebb made the decision to handle the investigation in a different way. Rather than following the departmental protocol and designating a single detective to concentrate on the case, Lieutenant Trebb brought together a fresh group of knowledgeable technicians to examine and deliberate over the Rita Curran case. This group approached the matter as though it had just happened. They then started re-examining the evidence, which included mailing the cigarette for additional DNA testing. This time, they used genetic genealogy, which is a method of conducting genealogical research using DNA databases to find prospective relatives of the person whose DNA does not match any current profiles. The genetic genealogy specialist discovered, after the DNA research, that there were close ties between the cigarette's DNA and the family of William Darius, who lived 2 floors above Rita Curran's flat in 1971. Detectives had questioned William Darius and his spouse, and William claimed to have been at home when the murder occurred. The detectives then tracked down William Darius' live half-brother, who voluntarily gave a sample of his DNA. It was ultimately established following the test that William Darius was the owner of the DNA found on the cigarette. A Florida crime lab received more evidence from the crime scene in 2022, including Rita Curran's torn housecoat. To further examine the evidence, they used novel DNA extraction methods at this lab. The genetic data from the cigarette had previously been forwarded to a genealogy company by the investigators. Their goal was to investigate a more extensive DNA database that would help identify the murderer. It's amazing how quickly the scientists and genealogical specialists were able to link William Darius's DNA to the cigarette. A great deal of investigation into public and genealogical records led to this discovery. Moreover, the DNA on the cigarette butt and the ripped housecoat belonging to Rita Curran matched. Then the detectives came upon a shocking finding. They discovered that William Darius had overdosed on drugs at a San Francisco hotel in 1986, leaving him dead at the age of 46. He and his wife had left Vermont soon after Rita Curran's murder, and they finally got divorced. Michelle, the ex-wife of William Darius, admitted lying to the police in 1971 over her husband's whereabouts the night of the incident. Michelle, who had moved to Eugene, Oregon, and assumed a new name, revealed that on July 19, 1971, she had argued with William Darius. He had gone for a walk, trying to cool off. Later that evening, he came back and told Michelle to tell the detectives that he had never left their apartment. He cautioned her that he might unjustly be considered a suspect in Rita Curran's killing due to his prior criminal history. Michelle was interviewed by Detective Thomas Chenette, who voiced doubts about her knowing that William Darius was the murderer. Given their recent marriage, their obvious love for one another, and his criminal past, he felt that she was shielding him. William Darius moved to Thailand and became a monk after they got divorced. But in 1974, he went back to San Francisco, California, where he eventually met Sarah Hepting, his second wife. Sarah Hepting revealed that William Darius was prone to violent outbursts during an interview with the Burlington police. She said that he had acted violently against her on 2 separate occasions. One such incident happened when they were talking to a female acquaintance. Out of the blue, he reached for a pocket knife and stabbed the woman in the abdomen for no apparent reason. Despite his arrest, the woman decided not to file a report. Darius later admitted to Hepting that he had thought he had stabbed her by mistake. Hepting stated that the second instance of Darris's aggression happened over dinner, when he started strangling her out of the blue. Hepting finally had enough and left him because of this. Rita Curran's parents were tragically killed after her case was settled, and they never found out who had killed their daughter. Nonetheless, her surviving relatives and friends remained in memory of her and took comfort in the resolution the case brought. Rita Curran was a lovely and caring individual, according to Jim Rabar, a former second-grade pupil. He recalled a play they had done together in which he had been a dancing clown clutching a teddy bear. He still treasures the teddy bear Rita gave him, even if he can't seem to find it now. Rita's sister, Mary Curran Campbell, lamented that 2 generations of their family had grown up without ever meeting her. Rita's brother, Tom Curran, chose not to dwell on the offender and instead concentrated more on the hardships that their parents and Rita went through. He complimented Rita and his parents on their tranquility. Lieutenant Trebb asserted with confidence that William DeRouse was the person responsible for Rita Curran's heinous murder as he concluded the case. However, he won't be held responsible for his acts because he passed away from a heroin overdose in a hotel room. However, the matter will be formally closed. Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed exploring these intriguing cold cases with us. If you found the video fascinating, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to Cold Case Mystique for more deep dives into unsolved mysteries. Your support helps us bring you more compelling content. Leave a comment below with your thoughts or any cases you'd like us to cover next. See you in the next video, and remember, the search for truth never stops.